is Ndako Mijindadi. I'm the head of investments at Lotus Capital Limited. Today, I'd like to do something a bit personal and tell us how to prepare our personal family budgets. We had mentioned previously that one of the good ways of being financially intelligent is to have a good plan, so here's me telling you some of the things that I put in my own personal budgets, and hopefully, it might be beneficial to you as well, right? So first things is to decide how frequently you want to have a budget, and most times is dependent on how your income is structured. So I earn money monthly, so I keep a monthly budget. But it's also possible for you to have a weekly budget. It's possible for you to have an annual budget, whichever one works for you. So let's just assume that we're using a monthly budget for ease of preparation. You might wonder that, if you have a monthly budget, what do I do if I have some expenses that are still made monthly, like my rent, for instance? It's very simple. So all you need to do is, if you have something that's just one or two things that you do spend on an annual basis, you can simply divide that amount by 12 and then make provision for it on a monthly basis. So it's quite simple to do. Right, so let's jump in. So what are the things that I put in my own monthly budget that potentially you can put in your own monthly budget? The first one for me is charity. Yep. So I feel like whenever you do get money, it's important that you plan to show appreciation to Allah for giving you this money by giving some amount of it out in charity. So decide what is comfortable for you to give out on a consistent basis and pen down into your monthly budget some amount for charity, and that would be beneficial, inshallah. The second thing that I put into my budget is education. And this is not just education for my kids in terms of school fees, so it's also payment for madrasa, for instance, all the types of education that is important to you. And we should understand that education, at least for our children, is the best legacy that we can leave for them. So it should be one of the things that ranks very high on your budget. I'd like to encourage us that when we're making provision for education expenses, we always try and aim for high quality schools or high quality teachers. It will be very, very useful for our children and for us as well. So there you have it. So the first thing was charity, and the second thing that I have in my own budget, and maybe you should too, is education. Now the third thing that I put in my budget is my rent, right? And why would rent come third? Well, you see, rent is one of the biggest expenses that most people are likely to have. So I can give us a rule of thumb. You can say, I don't want my rent to be more than 30% of my annual income, for instance, right? And then just make a provision for that on a monthly basis. It's good that you don't put too much money aside for rent, or you don't ensure, or you try and make sure that rent doesn't take too much of your income, because we should all be trying to own our homes one day, so there should be a bit of a buffer that you can put aside to eventually, one day owning a home. And you don't want anything to happen to your income and affect your ability to pay your rent, so always try and live within your means, all right? So the third thing will be, at least for me, my rent, yeah? And the fourth thing that I put in my budget is feeding. Now, this is a bit tricky because, what I eat and what you eat or what other people eat might be different, right? I might have different preferences and different tastes, and so it might be a bit tricky, but no problem. I think the thing to focus on is that you should make a provision for feeding, and that should be based on what you consider to be nourishing food. Now, nourishing food is usually affordable. So when you're making provisions, it should be for things like water as opposed to soft drinks, right? It should be for things like meat as opposed to corned beef. It should be for things like fish as opposed to sardines, or things like this. It should be for cooking at home as opposed to eating in a restaurant. So if you can just have your feeding budget for something nourishing and basic, you should be fine. If there's surpluses, then you can take, other kind of food items, okay? So for me, the next thing is feeding. Once I'm done with feeding, I move to my overheads, right? Now, what are overheads? These are the typical things that can pop up and really mess up your finances in the course of the month, like repairs in your home, gas, your electricity bill, your petrol, right, for your car, for transportation. So it's good to quantify these things and make a provision for it, at least for me, on a monthly basis. And the good thing about overheads is if you ever have any kind of financial constraint, God forbid, overheads are the easiest place to cut in your budget, right? So you can decide to say, oh look, I'm not going to use a generator today so I can save some money on petrol, or I'm going to go to work with my friends so I don't have to drive. The different things you can do with your overhead budget, just so you can manage your monthly expenses. So for me, one of the things that I put in my budget, and I encourage you to also put in your budget, is provision for overheads. Now, after that, I make provision for clothing. Right? And I mean, it's easy if people have some kind of tight finances to forget about their clothing. But I think it's very important that we, give some attention to how we adorn ourselves, right? And obviously, as Muslims, it's also very important that we look the part and we look smart and we look clean, right? So it's important that we take this seriously, almost like a religious obligation, to put some money aside and make provision for our clothing. Now, it doesn't have to be for buying new clothes. It can just be for a laundry person to make sure your clothes are looking nice and good, right? So put some provision in your monthly budget for clothing. The other thing that I can advise, which I do, and hopefully you can, is to make provision for recreation, right? Now, and what I mean by recreation is you can add gifts to this. So make provision to spend some money on yourself, on relaxation, on buying gifts for your wife, for your kids. I know we feel sometimes, as people that earn money and spend a lot on our family, sometimes we feel, oh, the fact that I bought gas or I paid the electricity bill, everybody should be happy and my kids should jump up. I can tell you for free, nobody's children are going to go, yay, daddy bought gas. Nobody's going to do that, right? So please, once in a while, buy them a toy, right? And reduce the anxiety in the house. So make some provisions in your monthly budget for recreation, for gifts, and the likes. Now, the other thing that I put in my budget, and I'd advise people, is to make provisions for travel. Right? And travel can be provisions for pilgrimage. So if you haven't already been for Hajj, or if you want to go on Umrah, right? Try and put some money aside and plan towards it. It's a big expense, right? So you want to do it, in small doses and take it step by step. And little drops will make an ocean. So please don't think any amount is too small. Make some provision for that journey of a lifetime, Umrah, Hajj, any other kind of journey to Masjid al-Aqsa, if that's what you want to do. But please take it seriously. Another thing that I put in my budget, I try to keep some money for my retirement, right? So I'm making money today. I might not always be strong enough to make money. I might be out of a job for whatever reason, God forbid, but it's important that we put aside some money for those kind of eventualities, for our retirement and things like that, no matter how small. Please always make some provision for a day when you will no longer be making steady income, right? Another thing that you should make provisions for is for medical expenses. Now, take care of your health. Make sure you're healthy, your family is healthy, you're eating well, you're sleeping well, you have good routines, right? But it's also possible that even when you do these things, you might once in a while take ill. You don't want your medical situation to wipe out all your resources. So it's very important that when you do make income, you keep some money aside for potential medical expenses. Now, it's okay if you've written down all these things and made all this provision, and by the time you look at your sheets or you look at your paper, you realize that, oh my God, my income is not enough to cover my budget, right? So that can happen. Take it easy, that can happen. Just remember that, even Nigeria, our budget is bigger than our revenue, right? So the most important thing when this happens is to try and think about things that you can do to make additional income to cover your budget. And when you realize that you can't make that additional income, then you can trim various areas of your budget, okay? Inshallah, I hope this talk has been very beneficial and everybody today can start keeping a budget and we're able to manage our finances better.